This is the drag news from 1959 from Chandler, Arizona. This is a Swamp Rat 1 with the 8 carburetors on top of the 671 blower. That went 8.45 that day and won the race, which was a low ET. I had been 836 before at another track, but this was out west where they were really fussy about how ETs were run. A lot of ETs in the early days, you didn't have to come up right to the line. You could get a little run at it, but they didn't allow any run at it in California and Arizona. That was a really good ET.
What kind of chassis was in that car?
I cut that out of a 1931 Chevy two-door sedan that I got from the old man from a junkyard out on East Hillsborough Avenue. I'll never forget, that was so funny. I called around hunting one because the sprint car guys, I had a T-model frame under my flathead, and when I put the Chrysler in it, it just bent it. And so a couple of my friends, older men, that guided me when I was young, sprint car guys said, you need to get a couple of 31 Chevy rails. They got a nice little kick. They're thin and lightweight and heat treated. And so I found one out on East Hillsborough, I'll never forget it. And I called the old man up out there, probably about 40. And he said, yeah, you can have it for 35 bucks, but you got to take it out. And so I made an appointment for Sunday morning because back in those days, you worked a half a day on Saturday and all the rest of the week at the body shop, and then Saturday afternoon, there was only one car in the family. You took the wife to do all the grocery shopping and everything, and then Sunday morning, if you was going to do anything, that's when you had to do it to your cars. And of course, all the wrecking yards stayed open because that's when the young guys came out and got their parts. So I showed up out there at 8 o'clock sharp in the morning on Sunday, and I've got a small box of tools with, a few end wrenches, pliers, and I've got a big cold chisel and a big ball peen hammer and a great big axe. These are wooden-bodied cars with a tin tack on it, and I restored one of these cars a few years ago myself personally, all the wood. I'll never do that again. Anyway, I never forget the old man. I walked in there, I said, I've come to get the chassis. He said, is that all the tools you got? I said, yes, sir. He said, Sonny, do you think you can get that chassis out of that car with those tools? I said, yes, sir. He said, give me the $35. I gave him $35 and I went out there. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, I drove out of that place in my 39 Ford with the 2 rails, just the 2 rails, all the cross members been removed. The 2 rails were sticking out the back of the 39 Ford, and the front one were going up under the seat on the passenger side. And the old man was just standing there looking at me with his mouth open. He couldn't believe what he'd seen. But I'd hurt myself pretty good. There's a scar on my wrist. It looks like a W. You can see to this day where one of the rivets didn't do just right. My hand slipped, and the blood just gushed out of it. I had one of those old red handkerchiefs, the kerchiefs they used to call them, and I'd carried that out there with me to put on the frame rails for the red flag for the police. And I wrapped that kerchief around my wrist and never even took a breath. I was driven. I was always that way. Nothing stopped me. It didn't make any difference about nothing. When I focused on something, that's what I did. And he just was shaking his head. He could not believe that I had done that. And then 2 weeks later, I was actually at Brooksville with that car for the first time. And I have it in the museum recreated that way so that people can see what it looked like that first time out. The car went through 12 different configurations over a 6-year period. And I have restored it back to the way it was on December the 8th, 1958, when it went 180 miles an hour, which they didn't believe in California. But I took that car to Bristol, Tennessee about 3 weeks after I restored it and went 182 on the good clocks. And so it would go that fast. But every time I find a set of 31 Chevy rails that are really nice, we make another one so that we have all the different versions. At the present time, I had the way it looks the first time out. I just recently finished it the way it looked when it went 176, and that was in the museum in Tallahassee for 6 months. And I restored it the way it looked, the way it came out of service in 1961. And all versions run and run good. And Lisa and I took the last version, the blown version, to the Goodwood Festival in England in June of 2015, and had a great time with it. And it's interesting to see it. And I show these cars on my tour when I give private tours. So my next version is going to be, it looked like a purple anteater at one time, and I'm going to make that one next on the next Chevy frame rail that I find.